Hello, I'm Franz Schneider. I spent a lifetime accumulating experiences that allow me to present passengers with interesting talks that always entertain. Let me take a few minutes to describe the many talks that I've given on cruise ships. I'll include a few clips from some of these talks so that you can see some of the content I've developed as well as my presentation style. I've been struck by the fact that a significant number of cruisers are very interested in classic cruise ships and what shipboard life was like aboard them. I started traveling on cruise ships when I was a boy. Often the first talk I give is a life on liners, which discusses 4 of my favorite ships, starting with the Queen of Bermuda. I give another talk about Cunard's legendary queens, which is very popular with cruisers interested in history. I've also been a sailor all my life and have stories to tell about racing on the ocean. One of my talks describes a race across the Atlantic that I did in 1966 with a then unknown 27-year-old Ted Turner, followed by a race across the Pacific a year later with Ted. As Ted Turner started building his media empire, I became his navigator in the 1970s. And in another talk, I describe exciting races on his boats to places like Bermuda and Jamaica. I also tell the incredible story of a man who is about to win the first non-stop, single-handed sailboat race around the world, and then disappeared under mysterious circumstances. I give several talks about navigation that are basic and colorful enough to appeal to a general audience. One tells how I set out to be a navigator as a teenager. Another talk provides some of the basics of navigation before illustrating them with 2 interesting events involving cruise ships. And although it is certainly not for a general audience, if there is interest, I have a talk that gives an introduction to the ancient art of navigating by the sun, stars, and planets using a sextant. I have found that 1 or more of these navigation talks work well for long passages, say a transatlantic crossing, where as many as 10 talks may be scheduled on sea days. In addition to these maritime-related talks, I have developed a number of talks that have appeal for a very broad audience. One of my most popular talks examines the facts and myths surrounding the Bermuda Triangle. I now give this talk on any cruises that pass through that area, such as Caribbean cruises and transatlantic crossings to and from Florida. Another talk stems from courses that I've taught at Harvard for 18 years, teaching psychology and neuroscience, and my talk explores how that knowledge can be applied to everyday situations. The talk is about avoiding disaster and examines how people respond when terrible events occur and how we can avoid repeating the mistakes that others have made. When not aboard ships, I've made my living for the past 30-odd years as a registered investment advisor and private trustee. I've developed a talk that's geared toward affluent retirees who like to cruise. It's called Making It to the Finish Line and describes strategies and specific investment alternatives that can boost retirement income and achieve the goal of not outliving one's assets. I also give a talk about Pan American, the pioneering airline that brought air travel around the globe. The talk is full of beautiful images of the airplanes that changed the world and the achievements of Pan Am before airline deregulation brought about its demise. Some of the images show the evolution of Pan Am's Pacific flying boats, the Boeing flying boat that was the first to cross the Atlantic, President Roosevelt on his way to the Casablanca summit, the first president to fly in an airplane while in office, the beautiful 707, and the tremendous jump in size when the 747 was introduced. With so many interesting talks about such a diverse set of topics, I am an excellent choice as a speaker on long cruises. In fact, over the past year, I've spoken on 3 transatlantic crossings, giving as many as 9 unique talks on a crossing, typically on sea days. And since Cuba became a cruising destination, I've spoken on a number of cruises to that unique island country. My most popular talk is titled Cuba's Beautiful Cars. I survey the popular models year by year and feature interviews with some of the ingenious Cuban mechanics who managed to keep these lovely cars on the road. I also give a talk that describes the 10-day period when the world came close to nuclear Armageddon, and I include a clip of John F. Kennedy's somber address to the nation. Another talk describes the long-running CIA program, Operation Mongoose, that had the overthrow of the Castro regime as its objective. A fascinating part of that story centers on Marita Lorenz, a 19-year-old daughter of a German cruise ship captain who fell in love with Castro and lived with him in the Havana Hilton. After a bitter parting, the CIA sent her back to Cuba to murder Castro, something she ultimately couldn't bring herself to do. Here's how Fidel Castro described the incident.
What I remember is that she began to cry at the beginning, and that in several minutes she could not tell any word to me.
And so he handed her his pistol. He was stretched out on the bed, fully clothed in his dungarees, and handed her the pistol and said, well, then do it. And she said she held the pistol, pointed at him for a minute, and then she put it down and said, I can't, Fidel. And he said, of course you can't. No one can.
As soon as Cuba reopens as a destination, I want to speak on your cruises to Cuba.